Hello, and welcome to RPG Book Club, I believe, 69. Today we're looking at H is for Hellmo, which is a short campaign or adventure made for Knave. I believe it was made for an RPG Jam. Dear Mr. Rogers, Hellmo needs more neighbors. The ones we got don't help us, so bring more each week. Hellmo promised to send them back. Your friend Hellmo. P.S. Have you seen Gordon and Maria? Summary. Sesame Hill, a small neighborhood in a big city, has been taken over by furry monsters. Their leader, Hellmo, demands that once a week a group of people enter Sesame Hill to serve the monsters until their release at the end of the day. The city has acquiesced to Hellmo's demands out of fear for the safety of Sesame Hill's original inhabitants, who are under guard at all times. Fred Rogers, a community leader in an adjoining neighborhood, has gathered a team to infiltrate Sesame Hill and rescue any captive neighbors. The players are on that team. So I think that's a fairly good start. The art is, I think, something that really sort of gets the job done. Elmo, or I suppose Hellmo, probably could be a little different proportionally, but it doesn't look bad or anything. I don't know if it was a experienced artist doing a more childlike style to fit the theme, or someone who is just an amateur or more amateurish doing the art themselves. But either way, I think it's more than good enough. I think this little note is a nice touch, and that this appears to sum up the point and concept of the adventure well. It doesn't really yet talk about what this book is supposed to be. It doesn't even really say it's a RPG adventure per se. It says it's made for Knave, but it hasn't done much to describe what the PDF is supposed to be in a sense yet. Hopefully, you would at least get that through whatever source you found this PDF from, at least. Running an episode. Hello there, Game Master. Welcome to Sesame Hill. It is I, Growler, ready to help you in your game mastering for this awesome episode starring yours truly. The first thing you need to know to run this episode is that you and your players are in control of how creepy or kooky you'd like it to be. Every episode can play very differently. It depends on your, say it with me, imagination. So that's a, nice way to establish tone, and that this can be a sort of horror-style game or just something more for fun. Before your players enter Sesame Hill, roll or choose a letter from A to Z and a number from 1 to 10. This is the letter of the day and the number of the day. You can use the letter of the day table to inspire you to build encounters for your players. There are 10 things from each letter to choose. But of course, since you are using your imagination, I am sure that you can come up with something thrilling, fantastical, and all-around entertaining. So 10 things from each letter to choose. It doesn't say what the number of the day is for yet. Yeah, it's not really clear how you would roll a letter from A to Z, given that there are 26 or something, but I'm sure people could figure it out. We'll just use a random number generator. The players enter Sesame Hill, basic format for an episode. The players enter Sesame Hill and are greeted by a monster, much like I am greeting you. I sort of think that works well to explain how they're supposed to show up. Just sort of introduce themselves and say what's going to be happening, perhaps. The monster will tell the players of a problem they are having and would like to solve. The players attempt to solve the problem or go about dealing with that monster in a way they choose. Of course, you would not deal with me, would you? During the process, they might discover some secrets or clues to help the players with their real mission, helping helping to rescue the captive neighbors. So that sort of tells me I have already read this through once, but it was a long time ago. And that sort of tells me, each episode is going to be a sort of monster task of the week thing, but along the way, there are things that build toward the wider goal of the campaign. And in Growler's advice, combine the location, monster, problem, neighbors, and the letter of the day tables to help build an encounter. Rolling twice on a table helps make the encounter more interesting. Also remember, the number of the day can help you choose on a table and also determine what floor the players go to if they enter the Countess's castle, which I advise they do not, since it's so creepy. Lastly, you can use monster stat blocks from almost any book, like Knave 2E or other RSR books. I wonder what my stat block looks like. So the number of the day, can help you choose on a table or do other things. Okay. Yeah, and there's a lot of tables. But the letter of the day table, I'm trying to think about how that would work because I know there are multiple options for each letter, and the letter is already decided, so you wouldn't necessarily be rolling on it precisely. 8M. So, like, most of these appear to be monsters or creatures, but then there's stuff like hurricane, implosion, jackalope, stuff like that. They are greeted by a monster. Yeah. Yeah, so you combine all those tables. I'm trying to figure out because not only do you have creatures and events here like hurricane and implosion, but you also have stuff like Hellmo, so you can potentially get, puppet Sesame Street style monsters as well, but there might be a separate table for that. And so far, this is just the letter of the day. Yeah, and so we've got various, Sesame Street parody creatures and a personality trait for them. And this is how you would get the monster that greets you at the beginning of the episode. I'm probably gonna practice, generated something for this in a second. Here we have the captive neighbors. And we've got their skills and professions as well as, personality traits again. These all may also be references to Sesame Street. I never watched Sesame Street much as a kid, so I'm not that familiar. Yeah, so you pick the monster on that table, and there's like 10 options. They'll get a problem, which is probably going to be generated from the letter of the day table. During the process, they might discover secrets or clues to help the player with their real mission, helping to rescue the captive neighbors. So it sounds like, sort of based on rolling on the neighbor tables, you are definitively supposed to encounter a neighbor each episode, which is pretty different than might finding captive neighbors, Like, if the neighbor table is going to be part of how you build an episode every time, then you're pretty much guaranteed to encounter neighbors. So this and this feel a little bit at odds, maybe. But anyway, going back to the table. Okay. I'm just trying to still figure out, how exactly I would go about generating an episode, because they don't give you a step-by-step process, which I think is fine, leaving it up to people. But something about the way this is written does make it feel a little abstract to me, I guess, and not like in a in sort of more in a confusing way than a figure it out on your own kind of way, but let me try and go through it. So I would say first roll on the monster table, and I get, say, 7. I get the Grump. Yep. Who is probably Oscar the Grouch or whatever. Then next, the monster has a problem, and in figuring out that problem, I would combine the location, problem, neighbors, letter of the day, basically just all the tables. So say I was on F. There's fairy, there's firebird, there's flower, fish, flood, flying fire, falling fiend, food. I would say food, I guess, just because that sort of goes together with garbage in my mind. People have stopped throwing out trash, and since he just usually eats from there, he has less to eat. So he wants the players to go get food, say. The other tables, like, I could also pick up some kind of danger from there. Let's say fire and just change that to, what do you call it? An incinerator. People are putting all their trash in the incinerator now. So the players have to, or at least the Grouch wants the players to disable that. And along the way, maybe there are just some birds that flew into the fire and are now on fire and attack the players or whatever, Just something a little crazy in there for fun. So I've sort of got a problem in the monsters from this. Another thing I'd need to look at is captive neighbors. I'm just going to do one of these, say. There's Bob the music teacher, friendly. I can say that he's being forced to work at the incinerator, and that just to, work it into the music teacher theme, they're making him use all of his music sheets as fuel for the incinerator. So that comes together fairly decently, but I don't know there was anything about it that without me, pushing it to would really fit with the theme of Sesame Street or horror or even really zaniness. A lot of the stuff that I encountered on the list were relatively mundane and, didn't have an inherent horror or Sesame Street theme. I kind of just had to go off of that. So far the, generation process works, but it doesn't seem to have a unified theme, other than it being a letter of the day relating to Sesame Street, but the letter of the day isn't, worked into the game or the story itself so far. Like, no one comes in to introduce the letter of the day. The fact that it all links back to the letter of the day might not necessarily be noticeable, and is not overtly supposed to be some kind of force affecting how things are occurring. So I would maybe, since it's the only thing so far that really fits the Sesame Street theme, other than the monster parodies, I would maybe, make sure the letter of the day is linked to the actual story and world instead of just being a sort of out of table mechanic. Or how do you say that again? It's been so long since I've talked about RPG stuff. Yeah, I'll just say out of character, even though that's not quite it. Instead of just being an out of character mechanic, really working the letter of the day in, I think would be nice. Another thing that sort of came to me is this is all happening like immediately. Like the players already start play. It's not like clear when this encounter is being built, is what I'm saying. Like, I think it makes most sense that this is something the GM has done to prepare before the episode, and the tables are to help them figure out what encounter they want to run, but it's sort of, just reading it without too much knowledge of how I would want to prep a game, I might think that you're supposed to roll at the table, the players enter Sesame Hill, and then you roll to see what monster they encounter. But if you do it that way, you have to you have to build the whole encounter from scratch on the fly, which might be a little difficult to get something really good out of that, unless you're an improv focused GM specifically. Yeah, rolling twice on a table helps to make encounters more interesting. So I don't know that that's fully true, because I guess that maybe gets you more two monsters or two options of monsters, but there's only 10 options here to begin with, and same with this, and frankly, I don't think what neighbor you get really matters that much. Like, the only table that. Not the only table like this is kind of interesting as well, but the main table I feel like is this, and it's not something you really roll on, I think. Maybe you're supposed to roll once you have the letter of the day for which one of these you use, but I probably wouldn't do that. So anyway, like I said, you can generate episodes from this. With a lot of it, I don't know what the point would be without the letter of the day theme really being worked in so that it matters. Because otherwise, there's not really a unified theme to the table that actually determines your events. Anyway, okay, secrets and clues. I don't know if I should try to do a voice for this one. I'll do it for like a page, maybe. Blah blah, welcome, game master. Have you heard about secrets and clues? There are many in my castle, secrets and clues to help the players understand and advance the story. They should be given out whenever and wherever and whenever it makes sense. Are the characters helping Zoe? Maybe she shares Hellmo's secret weakness. Do they find a cryptic message hidden in a strange cereal box in Hopper's store? Maybe Chris can tell them it's in his uncle's handwriting. Okay. I don't know how knowing whose handwriting it is would really help, but anyway. You can use the secrets and clues below to come up with your own that fits the type of episode you and your players want to play. Try to make 10. Blah, blah. Maybe that's supposed to be laughing. Yeah. Try to make 10 secrets and clues. Is that per episode or per campaign in general? Another thing I was thinking, which I may have forgotten because I had to do this voice, was, oh yeah, it's hard to say what exactly, like, if the players do decide when the monster shows up, yeah, we're just gonna fight him. How does the episode play out then? Is it just a single encounter with that monster? So I think there need to be a little more details on that. On how, like, you can't just necessarily straight out kill every monster you encounter at the beginning of an episode. Like, because I think working against them, still could make for something fun and interesting, but if it's not in a way that involves the letter of the day and the rest of the encounter, like working with that stuff to thwart them, uh, seems like the way that would be interesting, and there doesn't seem to be any mechanism or even general advice to encourage that. Okay, alright. Gordon and Maria have escaped Hellmo with Growler's help and are working on a plan to free the captive neighbors. This is a clue. Hellmo's weakness is being tickled. That's the other thing I was going to check. Are the clues even mentioned here? Yeah, it doesn't talk about the clue table here for some reason, even though that's something you would want to consult for an encounter, I would think. So I don't know why that's not there. It's also kind of awkward that it, just used the terminology encounter, but it's not clear if that's just like the problem of the episode, or there's supposed to be multiple encounters in an episode, or anything like that. Right. Yeah, I'm back down here. His weakness is being tickled. Birdzilla is upset at the other monsters because they don't believe Snuffleupagus is real. Zoe has a rivalry with Hellmo because he's always making fun of Rocky the Rock Monster. The group knows a secret way into Hellmo's world through the Undertrash, the tunnels under the Trashies, the Grump. Crown of 10 Thrones has the power to sway the monsters. I don't know what that is. Okay, Volta Machine. So these are all interesting clues. I think it's sort of better to consider these not as potential clues, but all things that are definitively true about the setting that players can just potentially find, which to me is slightly different than clues. Right, but this does help me sort of figure out what the overarching goal is supposed to be of sending the creatures back through the machine. Let me look at the beginning. Is just saving the neighbors an option? Okay, rescue any captive neighbors. So it doesn't really talk about sending the monsters back, which maybe you want to be a kind of secret, but I don't think it needs to be secret from the GM. So that should probably be mentioned at the beginning here that that's an option. Because the players, as far as I can tell, would never need to see this document. Alright, so there's Sesame Street. Again, it didn't mention the location table when planning an encounter, which is a little odd to me, but it is what it is. A tenement building once home to many of the captive neighbors. Bike shop, bird's nest. Like, a lot of these locations aren't too interesting. Okay. I suppose if I had seen this at this point, I would have worked the under trash into the Grumps encounter that I, sort of just spitballed earlier, but there's possible encounters down there. And here's the Countess's castle. It's not clear if these connect to each other or it's just sort of blocked off. And like there's other things. I don't know what the S means there. What I was trying to look at is at one of the clues. Yeah, there's a secret way to Hellmo's world in the Undertrash, but it doesn't seem like that secret way is labeled on this map, which I think would be helpful. Like I said, you're not really trying to hide things from the person seeing this document, so that should probably be indicated if that's a possibility. Alright, Countess's castle has 10 floors, each with a room challenge designed by the Countess. The floors can be accessed by an elevator pulled by a swarm of bats. Challenge, get the tiger to jump through the hoop. Okay. I like that challenge, that's kind of fun. The defeat the hands in a game of rock, paper, scissors. This challenge I don't really like as much. Because it's like, it gives you a bunch of stuff, but then the challenge is just to escape the room, and it doesn't really see why any of those matter. And, like, I mean, obviously keys go to doors, but why would you need 4 of them? And I get, having things for the GM to fill in with their imagination and stuff, but it's kind of like at that point you may as well have do some kind of puzzle involving escaping a room with a theme of 4 in it, there's nothing of having 4 locked doors, 4 eyes, and 4 keys, I personally feel, that really helps a person who doesn't know what you intend with those to come up with their own interesting challenge. Like, this just, for me, would be kind of annoying to try and make into a definitive puzzle, rather than. It's not really a fun prompt so much as a hurdle to creativity the way this is written, I feel like. So I would either have a different prompt or just have whatever the creator of the document had in mind for this room laid out more specifically. And a room with a pentagram on the form and 5 unlit candles complete the ritual like this. This obviously leaves a ton of room for it to be thought about how to solve that, what the challenge actually is per se. But it's something that's very easy to build off. There's a pentagram and candles and some kind of a ritual, whereas this is, it kind of feels like a word salad involving 4 to an extent that doesn't really act as a helpful prompt to me. Okay, more challenges. I'm probably gonna. I guess I'll read through them, not out loud, but. Yeah, so. Like, I like all of these pretty much, I think, except floor form. I'm going to go back to look at the last reference to the 10-point crown. What was that? Yeah, power crown of 10 thrones has the power to sway the monster. I don't know if that's a reference or something, but it does kind of seem random and not in a necessarily exciting way out of context. But again, it might just be a Sesame Street reference I don't understand. I realize I don't really give this enough consideration. Like, I talked about specifically the letter I landed on, but I should probably look it over more in general. Like certain things like abracadabra are more on themes than others. Asteroid is more excited than a lot of the options I found under F. Like, oh, there's definitely some zany options in here. I'm not seeing a ton of creepy options, which is an option for how the episodes go, so you should probably try and have a couple more of those. We're getting some more now. Yeah, that's part of why I wanted to go back. I just think it's very funny that just Quetzalcoatl, or however you pronounce that, is hanging out over here. But Q is a hard one to do, and that's a fun prompt. Let's see. Time. So the table is a bit better in terms of zaniness at least than I had originally seen just looking at F. But I do think maybe more of a Sesame Street's theme and working the actual letter of the day into the setting and plot instead of just an out of table mechanic would probably be for the best. And you've got these 2 specifically very developed areas, which is kind of fun. But the rest is mostly up to GM. Like, I don't know why that is. I don't know what the, format of the jam this was created for was, but I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing that they exist or that you only have 2 of them. It's just fun to note, I suppose. Okay, so there's a problem table all the way down here. And that's broken up by this clues table, so I wouldn't even really think Like, that would have sort of dissuaded me from thinking we were still in an overall list of tables at this point. But I'm going to see again if the problem table is mentioned. Okay. So I was wrong about the location table not being mentioned, and the problem table is mentioned. It's just the clue table that is not mentioned, for whatever reason. I guess they don't want that to, be forced into encounters, but still, I would probably include it just so people have a better idea of what's going on. Okay. Alright. So that's the end of it. And we're looking at the problem table now. Avenge, build, close, convince, defeat, deliver, destroy, disable, discover, explore, stop, steal, solve, rescue, protect, perform, invent, hide, find. Yeah, this table I don't feel is very on theme, and I was able to come up with, an encounter idea better without it, I feel like, just from the letter of the table and stuff. It's not like bad or anything, but I don't think it's that great. And also, the problem table should really be earlier, because that's going to be the second point of every encounter, right? The starting point, because the players start by meeting a monster, will be the monster table, so that should come first. I guess I can see why you might have the letter of the day first, but honestly, I do think it should be monster table, problem table, and then letter of the day. So the players are sort of, rather, the GM making all this is getting the tables in the order that he or she would most likely use them, with just, the monster that's going to come out and introduce the thing, the problem, then you've got an idea of what monster and what problem and how those, intersect, and based on the monster you can figure out why that problem is happening. And then the letter of the day helps you actually build out the details of the problem. I think that all works better. And maybe a separate set of tables, honestly, for things like secrets and clues and neighbor NPCs, because those are sort of the secondary objectives that the players need to be keeping an eye on, so maybe some separation there. Basically, this is definitely, I wanted to say, I feel like there's a ton of missing details specifically around Hellmo and Hellmo's world. Because, like, Hellmo is the ringleader of all of this. He's, like, the big guy. And also, there are a lot of references to a world he controls, but that never comes up in any sort of detail. It's not clear if you need to ever encounter Hellmo or his world, or why you would ever want to go there. Like, the secret way into Hellmo's world in the clues really implies that there would be some benefit to players getting there, but it's just sort of a place that Hellmo, controls, so it would just be a disadvantage to get there. You know what I'm saying? There's no objective in there inherently, as far as I can see, or anything to do with Hellmo, and I do think that's a pretty big oversight. Not having any details on the big bad evil guy Elmo. There's also, some stuff lacking in horror elements. I guess you get some on the counts plates, but there's not really a ton in terms of horror that's here. Like, the basic format, I don't think is a bad idea. You've got episodes of semi-randomized encounters with Sesame Street monsters, with a letter of the day associated, and each episode, which I'd assume would be a session, you get little clues and chances at rescuing neighbors to build to an overall objective for the campaign. And I think that's a fairly good idea for a format for this, but there is not sort of an overall summary of that as a format. There's bits and pieces everywhere, but there's not a full summary, I feel like. And there's the fact that the letter of the day is not, an actual mechanic. It's just sort of something behind the scenes, which I think is a missed opportunity. And then Hellmo is not really fleshed out, and what do you call it? Hellmo's not really fleshed out, and the main objective isn't really fleshed out except through clues, which does seem to be like it would more be trying to get the Sesame Street people back than saving the neighbors, though of course you could do either. Also, no clues on how you're, if you wanted to fight the neighbors instead of just doing their tasks, it's not clear how you would do that either. So basically, it works best as sort of a concept for a campaign with a couple resources to help you build out that concept as a GM. And I think there's a little more to it than that. Like, I think this is pretty fun, this is pretty fun, and the overall episode format idea are good, but but those aren't, the episode format isn't really overall summarized, like I said. So it's good, especially something that was made for a jam, but you'd have to be doing a lot of work yourself if you were gonna run it. And that's, of course, always fine. It's just better when a thing is going to tell you exactly what parts to come up with yourself instead of, this, which takes a bit of work and reading to really interpret what the intent is. So I think this just could be cleaned up in a couple areas and then fleshed out a little more, and it would be a lot better, is basically what I'm saying. But it's pretty good. It's a fun thing. And that's about it.